Good evening, folks. It's Wednesday night, and we're doing a little bit more development on this tutorial project. And basically, I have created a new asset for us to look at. I have also brought in some opening of doors and closing of doors sound assets. So I'm going to switch on the desktop audio and we're going to have a listen. But in the meantime, I have created this stake. Okay, created it in Blender, as one would expect. There is a smidgen of blood on the stake there. It's not very visible, but it was just a quick substance painter, get a wooden stake in and take it from there. So now we have our stake and dot, which we can bring up in the minimap. And if you now see a candle, our candle is basically the minimap pickup. And we want it in the center. So we can basically take it from there. And if we press play, you'll see that our minimap is not there until I run into there, and we now have the stakes as we pick up. I have also brought down the amount of light that are coming from the lights. Okay. And we now have the doors, which pretty much sound okay to me. The SNES, I take it you're called. How to optimize the game? What do you mean? What do you mean by optimizing the game? Can you elaborate slightly on that, Disney, on what you want to talk about? Increase the FPS? Well, I don't think I need to be honest. Okay, so do you want some general advice? Okay, show you a trick. I'll show you a trick if you like. I want to look at this. Hey, user 1212. Event graph, destroy actor. Okay. Right, we'll leave that for now. Okay, you want a trick. A lot of tricks can be done, but the easiest trick is to take stuff off of tick. Okay? So, for example, if I draw the minimap and I am moving let's say I am moving a marker. Okay, for example, if we look at our like, right, and we go to our blueprints. Now, I have a blueprint that follows the light, or the lich, right? The monster, the bad guy. Okay, now, under normal circumstances, right, I could do this. Right, I could say event tick. Event tick. Okay, and I could plug it in here and I could remove that. Okay, now when I press play and I grab the candle, right, you'll notice that our star, which is the marker for the lich, moves nice and smooth, right? But the problem is, it's running at 60 frames a second, right? And we don't need that amount of resolution. So what we do is we remove the tick, right? We make a custom event. Then when we begin play, we set that custom event to fire X amount of times per second. So we don't want it running 60 times a second, right? Which is not 0.016. We can get it to run only 5 times a second, right? So we set a timer to call update marker, and update marker does the same thing as what we just did on the tick, right? But it only updates 5 times per second instead of 60. Okay, so if you've got non-essential things, or it's not essential that they run every frame, then don't run them every frame. Okay, and you can use it as, you can even use it as like a gameplay thing, right? So if I was to do this and then change it to only update every second, right, I am saving 59 frames of calculations, right? So it's only having to calculate this once per second instead of 60 times a second. Okay, so you can see how that's optimizing the code. Okay, so if I compile that and press run, then our minimap is only going to update once per second. So you'll see that the star jumps, right? But that's okay, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing. That might be a good thing. In fact, it might introduce jeopardy, right? Because if I change this to only update every 2 seconds, right, we're going to have to keep an eye on the minimap to see what direction the bad guy's moving, because it's not necessarily moving the way we think it is, right? So in effect, you're getting like a time lapse, right? So there's one way to do it. Next way to do it is, if you've got a static mesh, get it to do LODs, right? So you will notice that LOD 0 here is 751 triangles and 611 vertices, right? But if I zoom out, the LOD does not change, right? But if I actually add LODs, right, I can get the LOD settings, right, and what we'll do is we'll say number of LODs 4, right, and apply the changes, okay? Now, when you do that, you'll notice now that we are on LOD 1, right? And it's only at this proximity to the stake that we get LOD 0. Right, now you'll notice that we've got 751 triangles, 611 vertices, right? But if I move out, I'm now at LOD 1, and it's now cut the triangles down to 376 and 341, right? So it's not using as many vertices. Now we're at LOD 2 and we're 181 by 106. Now you'll notice that it's not really changing quality for us. That's because it's further away, right? So we can zoom out again, and now we're at LOD 3, and we're only using 127 vertices. Okay? So obviously, that as well is going to improve the speed and optimize your code. Right, so if we go to LOD 0, we're using 611 vertices. If we go to LOD 4, or LOD 3, which is the fourth one, we're down to 127. Right, so it's 5 times more efficient. So there you go, how's that? So there's 2 simple ways of improving your efficiency with just basic things. Don't use event tick, and if you can, set LODs or level of detail. Okay? So hopefully that helped. But you can actually, as I said, with the likes of this thing, right, setting the timer, you can actually change gameplay, right, while optimizing your code, right? You might want this, right? You might not want a real-time update of, like, in this case it's the minimap, right? You might not want that, right? And 2 seconds might be a good way to do it. It increases tension because you might see a monster around the corner, right? And you don't know which way it's going to move, right? But if you're not updated for like 2 seconds, it could either have moved towards you or away from you. But you're not going to know until that 2 seconds is up, right? And in theory, why should you? Because you're looking around the corner. Or you can't see around the corner, right? Which adds another issue, but we'll not discuss that, right? But in theory, it adds tension, right? Because once at the point where it's round the corner, you don't know if it's going to move towards you or away from you, and you're not going to know it straight away, right? If you do the update in real time, then obviously you'll know which way the monster's moving, so it won't be a surprise if it suddenly jumps out in front of you, right? Now, obviously you don't want to set it too high, that basically the star on the minimap basically begins to mean nothing because it doesn't update fast enough, right? But the point being that you can actually, as well as making your code more efficient, you can make it actually part of the gameplay, right? Is what I'm trying to say here. So yeah, we're doing that. So as you can see, right, that looks pretty good, and we're only running it every 2 seconds, right? And that gives us a good effect, right? And that's what we want a good effect. Now the other thing is, make sure you're using, okay, next one. Do not use don't bind widgets to values, right? I am not binding 1 or 8 to 8 to my minimap, right? The 1 represents how many stakes I have picked up. The 8 to 8 represents how many stakes there are in the level, okay? Now, I only update the widget when I pick up a stake. I do not bind it to a variable, right? You should never do that if you can avoid it at all. Okay, now I don't know why, but Unreal Engine has these little moments where it decides it's going to run like a bag of crap, right? So basically what happens is, if I pick up a stake, right, we'll have a look at that. And is it on here? Oh, it's on BP stake, but I believe that we actually pick it up, right? We call the interface, right? And it's going to call the pawn, right? So if we look at blueprints, and we look in here, you'll notice that there's nothing running on tick, right? Begin play, event pickup, there's nothing on tick, okay? Even this, which is a timer, does not run on tick, okay? So basically, if I'm running a timer, I do not run it on tick, right? I run it, if I was to run a timer on tick, it would be, again, the same explanation. You're running it 60 frames a second. You're running it 60 times a second. If I run the timer at 0.2, right, I'm only running it 5 times a second. Right, so I can go away and do other calculations with those other 45 things, right? So again, this is a timer, but it's not running as a timer. It's run as a timer, but it's only running every 0.2 seconds, right? Now, in theory, I could run this at 0.5, or I could run it at 1 second, right? Doesn't actually matter, right? But at the moment we're running at 0.2. But you'll notice here, as I said, there's nothing that's running on event tick. Nothing here, right? And the widgets do not use binding of variables, because if you do that, then you're basically doing the same thing as event tick, right? Binding a variable in a widget is basically event tick. So we don't do that. Okay? So use events to drive things. Stay away from event tick and use LODs. And also use the profiling tool that actually you're supposed to use for actually optimizing your code, because then you can kind of see where things are getting clogged up, right? But there you go. So I was hoping that Jameson would be around, but he's obviously not. Right, we're doing this in a different place now, so we can delete that. Right. So I'm trying to see what so I'm guessing that our monster has basically went the other direction for a change. Keep it them as low as possible. Right? You shouldn't be using 4K textures, right? The maximum you should be using is 2K. And where possible, 1K. And to an even, it depends on, some of this depends on your game, right? Again, your LODs are going to help you, right? Because the textures are going to be changed depending on the LOD, right? But in theory, you can use whatever texture sizes you want, right? But it's the textures themselves and loading them in that is the killer these days. It's not models, right? modern day CPUs and all the rest of it, they can chuck around models and vertices till the cows come home. It's the problem is, if you've got all of these different models and they're all using 4K different textures, right? That's when you're going to have the problem, because you're not going to be able to load them in fast enough, right? And you're probably going to run out of texture space, right? But it depends on the size of your game. Depends on the size of your levels, right? A lot of these things are done, like you'll get the style of maybe, let's say, a Zelda or whatever, and the style of the game isn't just because it's that style, although some of it is. It's a lot of it is to save on textures, right? So some of these decisions are made to save space on textures so that they can use lower poly models and create a huge world, right? But all of these things get better and better as basically the hardware gets better and better, and the likes of Unreal Engine gets faster and faster at rendering this stuff, right? But what you've got to remember as well is your game won't necessarily be running on a super duper computer, right? So if you've got a $5,000 computer with all the latest hardware on it, then yes, you're going to get a great experience, but that's going to be a completely different experience for somebody that's running it on a laptop, right? So you ain't going to be doing 4K textures and expecting it to run well on a laptop. Okay, just ain't going to happen. So you have to keep these things in mind. But I'm pretty sure that if you look at this stuff, right, you'll be thinking this looks really good, right? There's none of this is 4K textures, right? If we look at, let's say the wall. So if we go to the dungeon layout, right, and we go to this, and then we look at a right wall, this is the element, right? So if we look at this, right, this is a material instance, so we can go to the texture, and then if we look at the texture, is it going to tell us? Well, it'll tell us here. That's 2K texture, right? So these are all 2K textures, not 4K. They're all 2K. Now, you can bring the normal map down, but you would have to test it, right? It's going to work for very simple patterns, right? But it's not going to work for intricate stuff. Okay, but the maximum you should be going is 2K. So hopefully that's giving you some hints. Okay. And I'm going to have to go and grab a drink. I shall be back in 2 minutes. Okay, guys, we're back. Now, what to put in the game next? Good question. We need to do something, or at least we need to get it ready, right? We need to do something with the pickups. Okay. Now, that is in our mansion controller, right? And we'll leave the movement as it is. And what we'll need to do now is when we pick something up, right, we update the minimap and when we run out, right, here's the part here, right, we show this in right. So basically what we want to do here is we want to get the pickup counter bonus right. Now this is the one where basically this is the one where we check if the level is complete, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a function and we're going to say apply bonus. In fact, we're going to call it apply pickup bonus. Okay. Now, what we want to do here is we're going to get our pickup bonus counter and we're going to say if it's less than, well, we're going to say if it's less than, if it's less than 10, we basically do nothing, right? So we say not boolean and then we do a branch okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do this in, let's say, reverse order, right? We're going to do this in reverse order so that we can basically do a case statement. Right? But what we're going to have to do is right, how do we work this one out? I've not got a frame of reference for this, to be fair. And what we might do here is apply it after we've picked up all of our stuff, right? So it's only going to apply interesting. I'm going to have to find out how this works. We can do it our own way. So do we only apply the best pickup? Or do we apply okay, there's a simple answer. A very, very simple answer. Number one, DayZ and H1Z1, if I'm not mistaken, were not games. They were mods for Arma. Okay? So the people making DayZ and H1Z1 did not make that game. They did not make those games from scratch. They made it as a mod, right? So, if they were to make it from scratch, they would have to make Arma first. And to put that into context, right, I'm going to do a quick Google, and I'm going to say Arma, what is it, Arma 3? Okay, so if I look at Arma 3, and then I look at the Wikipedia, right, then we have the company that made it called Bohemia Interactive. Okay. They have 300 employees. Right? So it took 300 employees to make Arma 3. Okay, now how long did it take to develop Arma 3? So we'll say development time. Right, they announced development of it in 2011, and it was released in 2013. So it took 300 people 2 years And that's not right, because all they did was announce it in 2011. So they were probably working on it, let's say, a year before that. So that's 3 years, right? So it took 300 people 3 years. Okay? So you said there's 3 of yous. Now what you got to remember is the 300 people that work for Bohemia Studios are probably all very, very good and knowledgeable and have experience in their jobs, right? So all the models and stuff are being generated by expert modelers. All the code and network stuff is being done by experienced people, etc., right? So if there's 3 of you, then it took them 3 years, then you can expect to do Arma 3 in about 100 years, right? So it's going to take you about 100 years. So that's why you don't see indie developers with teams of 1 to 3 people making Arma 3. And a mod for Arma 3. Right? You can see people, a team of 3 people doing a mod, but they ain't making Arma 3. Okay? It just ain't gonna happen. It's like saying 3 guys on the internet can make Grand Theft Auto 6 in a year, right? What you got to remember is the likes of, I can't even remember what they're called, Rockstar. Rockstar have got about 600 employees, and it takes them 5 years to make a game, right? So what makes you think 3 people can do it in a year? Right? Just ain't gonna happen. And it's kind of foolish to think it will. And then, of course, the other problem is, if you're going to make a game like DayZ or Arma or whatever, where are you going to get the servers? Right? Servers cost money. How are you going to do that? Right? You've got to kind of make a game yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's for your point of view. Right? You can just look at any other game like that. Right? Do you think, right, okay, let me put it to you this way. Do you think Rockstar take it from the point of view that there's just an inventory making zombies and shooter things, and a couple of the guys in the back are buying some assets off the store? Do you think that's how Rockstar do it? Right? Buying assets and buying animations buys you nothing. Right? If you don't know how to amend them and make them work in your game, I'll guarantee you 9 times out of 10 the assets don't do what you want them to do. Right? So if what you're saying is true, every company would be coming out with Grand Theft Auto 6 every year. And they wouldn't need 600 people to do it, right? They would just make it every year. No problem. Not a problem. As long as you've got one guy who just thinks in inventory and some zombies and shooter things, and you've got another couple of guys that are buying assets, right? You've got it. You've got it in the bag, right? It just doesn't work that way. Right? It's kind of like, in a way, it's kind of like music, right? And you see all these pop bands making it big or whatever, not so much now, but back when there was groups, you know, talented groups, you could pretty much guarantee that one of them or two of them were classically trained, right? And it's the same with the likes of DayZ and H1Z1. The guys that did those mods were part of the development team. So they knew the whole thing inside out, right? So that's how they were able to do it. Right? Now, the other thing is that having three guys, as I've explained before, is probably more the hindrance than a help, right? Because if you do any kind of software development in a team, you'll know that you need a team lead, a technical lead, right? Because otherwise, nothing's going to work, right? Because you can't have a guy going off and programming one part of the system and another guy going off and programming another part of the system if they don't know how they're going to connect to each other and how they're going to work together, right? Which is why you have a team lead, right? And that team lead defines all the classes, all of your, technical stuff, and says, right, here's how we want this written. We want this written with this. It's going to have this interface. It's going to have these parameters. It's going to output this. This is how it's going to interface to the other classes. That's how it's going to work. And then you get the coders who come along and read that and say, right, I need to do that, and that. If you've got three just people who are trying to write their own thing in their own way, it ain't going to work. Right? It just ain't. So that's why having more people can become more of a hindrance than a help. Okay? As I said, if you ever work in actual development, you'll know that's how it works. Right? If you've got a big project, you'll have a technical lead. Right? If you haven't got a technical lead, forget it. It's going to be a mess. Nothing's going to work. Right? Now, there's obviously always exceptions to the rule, but basically, that's how it works. Yes, it's a dream. There's nothing wrong with having a dream, right? But what you've got to do is you've got to make something, or your first project has to be something that you're capable of doing, right? Three guys on the internet, three friends, aren't going to make GTA 6. And they aren't going to make Arma 4. Okay? They just aren't. So your best idea is to rein in what you're trying to do. Now that's not to say in 5 years' time that you can't do it, right? So normally the advice I give is, especially if it's your first project on Unreal Engine, or I would say the same on Unity or anything else, is think of a simple game that you like. Right? Something really simple, that you know all the mechanics of how it works, how it looks, how it works, and make that. Just make a clone of it. Right? And that'll get you on your way. That'll get you started. And it'll give you a target that you know you can actually do. Right? But that's the problem with new developers. They aim for something that is totally unattainable at that point for them. So they never get there. They never even get close to getting there. Right? Do something that you're capable of doing. Not something that you might be capable of doing in 5 to 10 years' time. But as I said, there's nothing wrong with having your dream at the end is to make something like DayZ. Nothing wrong with that, right? But if you haven't got the capability to do it, then don't start it. Start something that you've got enough of an idea how to do it first. Well, I would leave your cousin then. Just say, you go and make your big game. I'm going to actually do something and finish it. That's the next most important thing, is finish it. Finish whatever you're doing. Right? Do the simplest game. You're never going to put it on Steam. You're never going to sell it. It's going to be something just to try out and see if you can do it. Finish it. But just to explain to your cousin what I just said, right? How are you going to make a big game? There's only 3 of you, right? All your Activisions, your Blizzards, your Rockstars, they've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of developers, artists, modelers, sound designers, blah, 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 right? You think that 3 people can make Grand Theft Auto 6? Well, go ahead. Go ahead. Can't wait to see it, right? And ask your cousin, how come Rockstar needs 500 people to make Grand Theft Auto, a big game, right? If we can do it with 3 people, how come it takes Rockstar 500? Okay, I'm going to have to switch my mic off for a second. Right, as I said, number 1, right, I'm going to finish on this. I'm going to have an early night, right? The SNES. Here's the point. If you've never worked in development, right, that's problem number 1. Because then you don't understand how difficult it is to work in a team. Right? Because you need a technical lead, right? To be able to write down all the design decisions to make everything work together. Okay? So for indie developers, it's probably easier just to, unless you've got somebody that's going to just work on models and animation, right, then it's fine. Okay? If it's not, you're going to have problems. Number 2. Why do Rockstar need 500 people to make Grand Theft Auto 6 if 3 people off the internet with no experience think they can do it in however long you think you can do it in? Right? And number 3 is you're not going to get any experience and knowledge by trying to make something that you're just not capable of doing. Okay? You don't go to school and learn about nuclear fission the first day. Okay? What you do is you learn to count. You learn to read. Right? And that's the same thing with Unreal Engine or Unity or anything else. Okay? You need to work on something to get your experience up. And that something has to be simple, or you're just going to be lost. Okay, the next issue, or issue number 4, is I'm taking it your game was going to be networked. That makes the complexity up by a factor of 10. Okay? Number 1, you have to learn about the networking stuff, which, as I said, is more complicated than just writing a normal game for a one player, right? So you're going to have even more stumbling blocks to learning anything, because you won't have a clue what's going on. Number 2 is, how do you propose to get servers for this game? Right? Servers cost money. Have you got the money? Right? Now, if you're trying to do something like DayZ, you can't make it P2P, right? Like Xbox, because that's got a maximum of like 8 players, right? How are you going to do it? You can't have Arma or DayZ with 8 players. Right? That's just not going to happen. That's not going to be what people expect. You're going to have a big empty map. Right? So that's not going to happen. So you're going to have to buy servers. Where are you going to buy them from? Right? Which brings another problem. Is you're going to have to write a different version of the game as well. Because the server's going to have a different version from the players. Right? So not only are you now writing one program, you're going to have to write a modified version for the server. Right? So, another problem. Max 4 people? Well, that's not DayZ, is it? Which, don't get me wrong, that might work, but you've still got the problem with programming for network stuff, which is a problem in its own right, because you need somebody to experience and expert in that, right? And it's not easy, right? So you've got that problem, right? But now you could actually go P2P, right? If you've got a maximum of 4 people, but your design's changed, right? So you've got to think about this. You saying maximum 4 people, your design has totally changed, right? Because now it's not DayZ, and it's not H1Z1, and it's not Arma, right? So the game that you said you were going to make no longer really has anything to do with those games, right? So all the design decisions you decided to take from those 3 games are no longer viable, right? So you're now designing a completely different game, right? And this is what you've got to be aware of, right? Well, as I said, best of luck to you, mate. I don't, you know, if that's what your cousin wants to do and you want to back him up and go for it, then go for it. But I would say against it. The way I would say it to here's the way I would do it, right? If he wanted to make a big game, right? I would say to him, right, okay, I'll make a big game with you. But first, we make a small game. Right? And then say, if we don't finish the small game and put it out for people to play, then I ain't making the big game with you. Right? And get your friend to pick a game, a simple game that he likes, and say, right, we're going to make a clone of that, right? We're going to make it as good as we can. We're going to put it on Steam or on one of the indie game websites or whatever, right? So that means that you won't be able to put it out unless it actually works and you're not embarrassed with it, right? And then if your cousin will do that, then you've got a chance, right? But if he just says, no, I'm not making a small game, then you have no chance. Just forget it. Right, so you've got to put out a game. How much experience do you have? No, I made a game in 4 months. Start to finish, 4 months. Right? Granted, not a big game. If you check it out in the description, the link to my game is in the description. I made that game in 4 months, start to finish, everything, the whole lot. Right? Now, most of the assets I had bought previously, but they weren't for Unreal Engine, but I converted them. Some of the assets I made myself, but I did a game on my own, start to finish, in 4 months, and put it on Steam. So the year is nothing to do with it, but you need a target to hit, or you need a project, you need to pick a project, right? Have something that is within your capability, and you just need to focus on it and do it, right? And on that bombshell, I'm going to call it a night. So it's been nice speaking to you, Disney's. I wish you the best of luck. Pop in anytime you like. Hit the like and subscribe and all that stuff. And if you want to support the channel, you can check the links in the description. And I shall speak to you tomorrow at 2 PM Central, when I'll be streaming again. And thank you for watching. Bye bye for now. You can also join the Discord, Disney's. My Discord, there's a link also in the description. And you can join me in there, where I answer questions and stuff like that. And I shall speak to you all later. Bye bye for now.